Gnosticism. Imagine Christianity as a massive puzzle, and Gnosticism as a group that tries to jam in a few extra pieces from a completely different set. Gnostics believed they had secret knowledge, or gnosis, that let them understand the true nature of reality. To them, the material world was a bad, glitchy simulation created by a lesser, imperfect God called the demiurge. Meanwhile, the real God was chilling somewhere beyond human understanding. According to Gnosticism, Jesus wasn't here to save people from sin, but to help them wake up from the illusion of the physical world. Think of him as a spiritual hacker trying to jailbreak souls out of this corrupt universe, but the early church leaders weren't buying it. To them, Christianity was about salvation, not some cosmic escape plan. The Gnostics were soon labeled heretics, and their texts were banned. Ironically, their secret teachings didn't stay secret forever. Some of them were rediscovered in the 20th century, like hidden cheat codes in an old video game. Arianism. Now let's meet Arius, a guy from the 4th century who thought he had Christianity all figured out. He believed that Jesus was not equal to God, but was more like a superpowered assistant, created by God and promoted to divine status. To Arius, saying Jesus was equal to God was like saying a flashlight is as bright as the sun. It just didn't add up. This idea sparked one of Christianity's biggest theological battles. On one side, you had Arius and his followers, and on the other, church heavyweights like Athanasius, who insisted Jesus was fully God. The debate got so intense that Emperor Constantine called a massive church council in 325 AD, where Arianism was officially declared a heresy. But just like a cancelled TV show that keeps getting rebooted, Arianism didn't disappear overnight. It lingered for centuries, influencing later groups who liked the idea of Jesus being divine, but not quite as divine as God. Nestorianism. Ever wonder how people can argue over the smallest details? Well, in the 5th century, Nestorius, a bishop, got into a serious theological feud over how Jesus' divine and human natures work together. He didn't like the idea of calling Mary the Mother of God, because to him, that made it seem like she created God. Instead, he suggested Jesus had two distinct persons, one divine and one human, coexisting but separate, like a divine buddy cop duo. The problem? The mainstream church saw Jesus as one person with two natures, not two separate personalities. So in 431 AD, Nestorius got booted from his position, and his ideas were condemned. But his followers didn't just fade away, they moved eastward and spread their beliefs, founding what became known as the Church of the East. Turns out, theological debates have a way of creating whole new branches of Christianity. Sabellianism. Imagine a superhero who changes costumes depending on the situation. Sometimes a firefighter, sometimes a doctor, but always the same person underneath. That's kind of what Sabellius, a 3rd century priest, thought about God. He believed that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were not three distinct persons, but just different modes of one God, like a cosmic shapeshifter. Sounds simple, right? Not to the early church. They argued that this view completely messed up the relationship between the three persons of the Trinity. If God just switched roles instead of actually being three distinct persons, then who was Jesus praying to? Himself? Awkward. By the 4th century, Sabellianism was labeled heresy, and the church reaffirmed that God exists as three distinct persons in one divine essence. No superhero costume changes necessary. Adoptionism. Now, picture Jesus as a regular guy who gets spiritually adopted by God and promoted to divine status, like winning a cosmic reality show. That's the core idea of adoptionism. This belief claimed that Jesus was born human and only became divine at his baptism, resurrection, or ascension, depending on which version you followed. To early Christians, this sounded like a major downgrade. If Jesus wasn't divine from the start, then his sacrifice wouldn't hold the same weight. Church councils weren't having it, and adoptionism was stamped out as heresy. But the idea kept popping up over the centuries, proving that some theological debates just refused to stay buried. Patripassianism. Ever heard of a plot twist that makes a movie completely confusing? That's kind of what Patripassianism did to Christian theology. This belief claimed that when Jesus suffered and died, God the Father suffered too, because they were the same person. To the mainstream church, this idea made about as much sense as a detective and the criminal being the same person in a mystery novel. If God the Father suffered on the cross, then who was running the universe? The church declared Patripassianism a heresy and emphasized that while Jesus and the Father are one in divine essence, they are distinct persons. Mystery solved. Marcionism. Marcion was like that guy who walks into a movie halfway through and decides the first half wasn't worth watching. In the 2nd century, he took one look at the Old Testament and decided it didn't belong in Christianity. To him, the God of the Old Testament was a completely different, lesser being than the loving God revealed by Jesus. His solution? Ditch the Old Testament entirely and create his own edited version of the New Testament, cutting out anything that still sounded too Jewish. The early church was not impressed. Marcion was excommunicated, and his ideas were condemned. But his attempt at remixing the Bible forced church leaders to define which books actually belonged in the Christian canon. So in a way, Marcion's heresy helped shape the Bible we know today. Conclusion: Christian history is full of wild theological debates, dramatic excommunications, and beliefs that just wouldn't stay buried. Each heresy might have been rejected, but they all left an impact, whether by forcing the church to clarify its teachings or by inspiring new movements that carried echoes of their ideas. So next time someone says theology is